I've become kind of well known online for being the hopefully friendly debunker of ancient astronauts, ancient aliens, specifically the work of somebody called Zecharia Sitchin. And people often wonder when they come across me commenting in some way on that material, how in the world did you ever get drawn into this? Again, as a biblical scholar, this isn't where we'd expect to find you. How did this all happen? Well, my story really begins in what should have been the first year of my PhD dissertation. Once I got through my comprehensive exams, I felt kind of burned out, and I thought, well, you know, it's not going to kill me to skip a year. They give you 5 years to do this thing, so I literally decided to skip a year, what would have been my first year of the dissertation, and do something fun. So I decided to write a novel. Now, I had a command of ancient texts and ancient languages because that's what my PhD is in, and I'd always been interested in paranormal stuff, particularly UFOs, so I decided, hey, why don't we throw all of that in a blender and see what comes out? And my angle was, I'm going to write a story where all of the data points of the story are real. Every ancient text is real, every government document's real, everything that a historical character says is real. It's all real, all of the data points, but what's fiction is how I connect them, and of course the story and the characters. Well, I did that, and to make a long story short, somehow or another, I got invited onto the nation's most listened to late night paranormal talk show, Coast to Coast AM. In those days, it was the Art Bell Show. He was the host. And I went on that show with my novel, which is called The Facade, and the rest is sort of history. I got drawn into this world because of this show. It has a huge audience. Well, once I went on the show, I began to hear about a fellow named Zecharia Sitchin. Okay, he was a leading ancient astronaut theorist, and he was sort of branded and characterized as an ancient languages scholar. And I thought, wow, you know, kindred spirit, I got to find out who this guy is. And when I did, it was pretty disappointing. I have since become known as the leading sort of Zecharia Sitchin debunker because I don't think Zecharia Sitchin knew any ancient languages and really did any kind of research in them to prop up what he was saying. But that's, again, the short version of how I got drawn into this, why I would get invited to UFO conferences, why I've been on all sorts of talk shows talking about this stuff. It's really about that, you know, blowing that first year of my dissertation, writing the novel, and then getting connected in this way with Zecharia Sitchin. Since a good part of what I do online is really about debunking ancient astronauts and ancient aliens, the show, and of course the topic, I often get asked, hey, have you ever been asked to be on the show, Ancient Aliens? And the short answer is, yeah, I have. I've been asked 3 or 4 times to go on, and my answer is always the same, and it gets a sort of a negative response. So I've never been on the show, and I should tell you why, because it's kind of funny. Right after I wrote my novel and got on Coast to Coast AM, I was asked by the History Channel to do a show that, at the time, at least when I got the email, was called UFOs and the Bible. So I thought, well, why not? You know, I get a free trip to Los Angeles, you know, we'll go out there, we'll do some filming, it'll be fun, why not? So the day before I was supposed to leave for that, and everything was booked, I got an email from the studio, and it was the list of questions they were going to ask me in the interview. And I could tell pretty clearly that the answers they wanted were not the sort of things I was going to be giving them. They were all leading questions designed to make the Bible sound like it taught that there were ancient aliens and alien visitations in antiquity. So I emailed him back and said, hey, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to give you the answers that you really want. And they were very apologetic and said, oh, it doesn't matter, we want all sorts of views here, please come out and you know, do the interview. So I did. And sure enough, it was 2 hours of them trying to bait me into talking about aliens in the Bible. But I did the interview, and of course you have to sign off on it that they can use whatever you say in any way they want. I didn't think anything of it. They said, hey, in about a year, the show is going to air, and you know, that'll be that. So I said, okay, went back home. Well, in the meantime, I had friends interview for the same show, and they were a little bit smarter than I was. One of them insisted on audio recording his interview. He did that, and then he went back home, had it transcribed, and sat on it. And then when the show aired a year later, he did the same thing with the audio in the show. And he found out that what happened was they were splicing lines from people that they had interviewed from one section of the interview to another to make them sound like they were promoting ancient aliens. And now the show had changed to Aliens in the Bible. They actually changed the title. Now, I got off lucky because I sort of knew this going in, that they were trying to create this angle, and I actually don't appear in the show. They ditched the entire 2-hour interview, but I was thankful because there were some really leading Christian apologists who were in that show that came across, again, intentionally on their part, as promoting the idea that the Bible really does have aliens and alien visitation in them. So whenever I get asked about going on the History Channel, I usually say, hey, I'd love to be on the show if you can promise me in writing that you won't do this. And then I send them the link. And you can read the whole story and find the links to where the evidence, again, of this splicing I'm talking about really demonstrably exists. They really did do this. If you go to drmsh.com, that's my homepage, and just search for History Channel, you'll find the whole episode. But I like to tell the story for a simple reason. It tells you very clearly that shows like Ancient Aliens are not interested in really telling you the truth. They are not interested in doing real investigative research. What they're interested in is getting people to watch the show so that they can sell advertising. That's just the way it works. So what are some of the things that Zecharia Sitchin teaches that I object to, again, as a biblical scholar? Well, let's start with one that everybody seems to have heard of, and that is Sitchin's idea that the Bible really teaches in Genesis 1, specifically Genesis 1:26, that humanity was created by extraterrestrials, by aliens. And he gets this by talking about the word Elohim. Now, in Genesis 1:26, again, it's a very familiar verse. So God said, let us create humankind in our image and our likeness. And so God created humankind, male and female, in his likeness. People will note the plural language there, and they'll also point out that, well, God, the word for God there is Elohim. And Elohim in Hebrew is a plural. And if you don't have, again, facility in the ancient languages, or at least Hebrew, you could be misled by this. Sitchin fundamentally misunderstands the term Elohim, and he fundamentally misunderstands Genesis 1:26 because he ignores grammar. Now, let's just start with the word Elohim, and then we'll talk about what the verse actually is describing. Elohim is spelled as a plural. The I-M ending on Hebrew nouns is the sign of the plural. But that doesn't mean that it points to plural beings. And you say, well, that sounds contradictory, Mike. How can you say that? Well, let's illustrate it from English. We have words like this in English. If I say deer, D-E-E-R, or fish, F-I-S-H, and then I ask you one or more than one, which is it? There's no way for you to tell, because fish and deer and lots of other words in English can be singular or plural. You have to put them into a sentence to know what is meant. If I say, the deer is in the field, now you know that I'm only talking about one deer because of the verb is. If I say the deer are in the field, now you know I'm talking about more than one. What I've just demonstrated for you is grammar. Even though we don't like grammar, it might bring back terrible memories of an English class in your past at some point, it actually serves a purpose. Grammar tells you how to understand words that could be singular or plural. That's its function. Elohim is the same way. In the Genesis 1 passage, when Elohim actually creates humans, male and female, in Genesis 1:27, all of the verbs are singular. Subject-verb agreement. It's grammar. This tells you that a singular God is the creator. And not only in Genesis 1, but every passage in the Hebrew Bible that talks about the creation of humanity is always with singular verbs. Every one of them. It's entirely consistent. So when Sitchin says that Elohim means that we were created by multiple extraterrestrials or a team of extraterrestrials, he's not telling you the truth. Okay, this is a misunderstanding, whether it's him being ignorant of the situation or something more deliberate, I don't know, but it is not the truth. And you say, well, why is there plurality? Let us create humankind in our image. God is speaking to someone there. He's speaking to the members of his heavenly host. We know that they were there before the creation of humans from Job 38, verses 7 and 8. The sons of God were present at the foundations of the world, at the creation event. God is announcing to them his intention to create human beings. We call it a plural of exhortation in scholarly academies. If I walked into a room and said, hey, let us go get pizza, let's get pizza, I'm announcing something to a group. They all get in my car, we go to the restaurant, I choose, I pay, but we all eat. That's kind of what you see in Genesis 1. God has announced something he has decreed in his own sovereignty to do. He's announcing it to a group, and somehow there's a link between them, him, and us, and that thing is called the image. Now, if you want to know more about that, you could read my book, The Unseen Realm. I talk a lot about the image, but what you can't get from the passage is the idea that human beings were created by multiple deities or, of course, extraterrestrials. The text simply does not teach these things. Now, I made the comment earlier and have said it many times on talk shows that I don't believe that Zecharia Sitchin really could read and do work in any ancient languages. And I'm actually serious about that. And some have sort of pushed back on me and said, well, Mike, Sitchin was Jewish, and so he must have known Hebrew. Well, I don't know that he spoke Hebrew or not, but let's just give him the benefit of that doubt. He was a Hebrew reader, again, modern Hebrew. You would think that that translates into something important, but it really doesn't. Let me illustrate. Your children, let's say, maybe 5 years old or beyond, they could read English. They could read the Bible in translation. They are sight readers of English. But here's the question. Does that make them interpreters? Does that make them analysts of what they're reading? This is what ancient text scholars do. You have to study things like grammar and genre to figure out what in the world a writer was saying. How did the writer intend to be understood? That takes analytical skills, and specifically skills in linguistics and philology and lots of other areas that ancient text people like me do. I don't believe that Sitchin could do any of that, and I illustrated it with Elohim. He makes fundamental misunderstandings of Elohim part of his work. That's either irresponsible or it shows some incompetence in that area. I actually think that that carries over to the ancient language area that Sitchin is most known for, and that is, again, allegedly, his expertise in Sumerian and Akkadian, one of the languages of ancient Mesopotamia. Now, specifically, Sitchin claims that his translation of cuneiform tablets reveals the following, that an alien race called the Anunnaki, whose home planet was something called Nibiru, that is actually sort of a rogue planet beyond Pluto that cycles through our solar system every 3,600 years, that the Anunnaki on one of these cycles through our solar system sort of got off and went to Earth and created human beings. This is the alien mythology that Sitchin is peddling, that Ancient Aliens has sort of picked up on in a number of ways. Well, there are significant problems with that. One of them I tried to show, again, just by a simple video. If you go to my website, sitchiniswrong.com, you'll see me in one place going to a website called the Electronic Text Corpus of Sumerian Literature. This is a free website. It's run out of the University of Oxford, and the video shows me typing in the word for Anunnaki into the search engine, hitting the button, and you get back all of the places where the Anunnaki are mentioned in the Sumerian Mesopotamian tablets. All you have to do then is click each one for an English translation, and you can read it yourself. What you'll find is that the Anunnaki are never associated with Nibiru. You'll find that the Anunnaki are not, residents of a specific planet. They're not space travelers. They're none of the things that Sitchin says they are. If you go to the same website, sitchiniswrong.com, and look up Nibiru, you'll find that Nibiru is not a planet beyond Saturn. There are no planets known in the cuneiform tablets. Astronomical research that the ancient Sumerians and Akkadians actually did. There is no planet beyond Saturn in those tablets, those astronomical tablets, because that was the extent of naked eye observation. So Nibiru is not a planet beyond Pluto. They didn't know of any such thing. Nibiru is actually associated with Jupiter and Mercury, and it's also called a star. Now, it can't be all three. What Nibiru actually refers to is a celestial object or an event that crosses a path with something else. That's sort of what the term means, crossing. So what Sitchin is telling people is simply not in the tablets. It's just not true. And that matters because what it tells you, it's not an issue of, oh, Mike, you just disagree with this particular translation that this brilliant man has offered us and given us the real history of the human race. No, it's not an argument about translations. What I'm saying is even more dramatic. I'm saying that what he's claiming isn't even in the tablets. It doesn't exist. You can't find them. And I'm trying to get people to the information where they can validate and verify that what I'm saying is correct here. These ideas are not in the tablets. And so what Zecharia Sitchin has done is he has fabricated his own mythology. He is not saying things that are based on real research in the tablets. He is literally making things up.